это все 20, это примерно 10 дней.
Этим 4, этим 7, этим 12.
This man's name is Vladimir Soldatov. In 1965, he got degree of candidate of chemical sciences. In 1970, doctor of chemical sciences. In 1972, professor. In 1977, corresponding member. And since 1984, academician of National Academy of Sciences of Belarus. Life of the late 50s dramatically changed as far as we launched the first satellite. It was in 1957. I was a fourth-year student of the university at that time. I remember that everyone was literally raving about space exploration. And when I was postgraduate student in 1961, Gagarin flew in space. Well, all who were inclined to scientific work wanted to do something space-related. I was, of course, not the exception. In this folder, 56 patents and copyright certificates, including this certificate number 211935 for the methods of obtaining ion exchange substrates for growing plants, issued October 16th of 1965. Vladimir Soldatov was then 28 years old. A year earlier, as part of the program of Mars colonization, which was headed by academician Sergei Korolev, Soldatov's institute received a special assignment. This work wasn't very exciting. It's supposed to develop a waste management system of human excrements in space. So that products should be converted into nutrient solutions for the plants. Plant should grow on this solution and presumably could be consumed by the astronauts. And thus there will be a small full ecological cycle. But it didn't work. It was technically impossible to create a system that could reliably operate in space. There were no funds for the solution of this program at that time.
Средств для решения этой программы тогда не было. Много чего не было.
But nevertheless, Korolev was a visionary and decisive person. And he started this program anyway.
И он все равно эту программу начал.
For all this outer space crop, they then fought several well-known science centers, Moscow, St. Petersburg, and so on. The main idea was to adopt the hydroponics for this case. Hydroponics, theoretically, a great economical option for growing plants in the space. Enough to take about 10 liters of nutritious solution and circulate it on a closed system, from time to time adding components. That's right, but the fact that these 10 kilos of solution, to maintain the required condition, we need a scale. A direct problem in space. We need volume meters, micropumps. Solutions are supersaturated. It could precipitate. So we need a lot of equipment around.
То есть нам нужна целая серия приборов вокруг этого. Или Если это аэропоника,
Or if we are talking about aeroponics, that's well as you have carrot to fix. So it has roots here, but here is not. How does it divide in space? With this hassle, even in our laboratory it was unclear how to walk. But nevertheless, it was research that was perceived by government as most perspective, or as most potential, because it was the local people and we were both a little on the side. I said, well, the only equipment we need is bucket with ion exchange soil. That's all. And none of measuring appliances, pumps, none of this is necessary.
Но когда
But they were still very interested in promoting of traditional methods, different variants of hydroponics. However, Vladimir Soldatov were persistent.
мы подумали, что
We believed that better and easier to make the artificial soil.
искусственную почву на основе ионитов.
At that time, I was involved in development of new ion exchange materials. In 1971, Soldatov got the Lenin Komsomol Award for the innovative research of thermodynamics of ion exchange processes. In 1980, National Award of Belarus for the development of theoretical principles and technologies of artificial ionic soil production as a universal medium for plants' nutrition. Vladimir Soldatov have been researching ion exchangers for the whole life. There are 650 scientific articles dedicated mostly to ion exchange materials. Ion exchangers are solids, which have functional groups in the structure and can absorb a significant amount of nutrients needed for the plant growth. Nutrient chemically bound to the functional group of these materials and can be released in ion exchange for any other substances. These are the substances that the plant emits, giving a signal that it needs nutrients. So here is water, here is the root of the plant, here is the ion exchanger. Plants are released into the environment are also charged particles. For example, positively charged hydrogen ion. Well, this hydrogen ion, when it reaches the surface of the ion exchanger, may replace the potassium ion. Potassium released from here and can be consumed by the root of the plant. In fact, this substrate contains full set of nutrients, and plants can grow on it without any negative consequences, such as root burn, the overabundance, or anything else. The plants will acquire only nutrients, what they asked for. Here we tried to do it, and it happened. I must say, we did it on the first try.
Но настоящее испытание началось
But the real test began in next 2 years. Soldatov and his scientific team were included to the classified space program MAVR.
Уже в 1967 году был заложен большой.
In 1967, we became a part of big experiment which was called NLK. It was a unique laboratory complex imitating of the cockpit of a spaceship, a lot of tons in weight.
Космического корабля во много тонн весом.
Мы стоим перед дверью камеры.
We are standing in front of the door.
Сейчас мы переступим.
Now we cross the threshold.
Сейчас
Now the hermetic door will close, and the three of us will remain surrounded only by glass and metal.
1960.
In 1967, November 5th, 5 p.m. Moscow time, 3 people entered to a secret space lab.
Вот таким образом мы стали...
So we became one of the co-executors of the MOVER program.
Эта программа
This program was a long-term research of Mars and Venus. Such an interesting program focused on both Mars and Venus exploration. We had made an appropriate amount of ion exchange substrate sufficient to feed the plants in the space lab. That was a little over a ton.
Это было чуть больше тонны.
Наши жизненные площади
Our living area is 12 square meters. Half of it is occupied by equipment. The scientists are watching us through the cameras. We're under surveillance all the time.
находимся под наблюдением. января
On January 22nd began the second period of the experiment. Mutual influence of man and plants was investigated. In this period, thermocamera and greenhouse were connected to the space module.
Дело в том, что сначала соорудили оранжерею.
2 months it was standing, but not connected to the residential compartment of the system.
Подключенный к жилому отсеку этой системы.
After the beginning of the second phase of experiment, Soldatov suddenly got the phone call. The percentage of carbon dioxide in the air has increased dramatically. The temperature has begun to rise. The question was, what stands out from your ionic substrate? We knew that it couldn't be a reason. I immediately went to Moscow. But when I arrived and came to the lab, scientists told me that everything is okay. Carbon dioxide content was increased due to the fact that the testers just become more active, consume more oxygen.
Увеличилась активность самих испытателей.
И все равно невозможно объяснить, что означает для нас оранжерея.
It's impossible to imagine what greenhouse means for us. How important to see the plants, to touch them, to know that they are grown here.
В оранжерее росли высокопродуктивные зеленые культуры с коротким вегетационным периодом.
In greenhouse, highly productive green crops was grown, a salad, dill, and cucumber grass.
Личная трава.
Their yield wasn't very high, from 2 to 4 kilograms per square meter per vegetation.
Урожайность была, на первый взгляд, не очень высокой. Это от 2 до 4 килограмм на квадратный метр за вегетацию. Но дело в том,
But
что
the fact
вегетация
is
была
that the
очень
vegetation
короткой.
was very
15
short.
дней
It was
света,
15 days of light
15 дней
and
полной
15
темноты.
days of total darkness.
Это имитация лунного
It was an
дня и ночи.
imitation of the lunar day and night.
Они получали в среднем
They
по
received an average
150
of
грамм
150 grams of green
зеленых,
plants a day.
зеленых растений в день. Каждый.
"50 years ago, the biologist Andrei Bashko spent 365 days in this room. My household was here.
Из воспоминаний.
The constant noise of 90 decibels. It's like if someone put the bike, started the engine and left.
Мотор, да так и оставили. А еще сны.
And dreams. We have the diaries. It was fair and we write what we saw in the dream. About a month later, we began to see the chamber plots and the normal life, you know. So, in a month and a half, our mind finally realized that we were completely isolated.
В изоляции, где день — это когда лампы горят, а ночь, когда они гаснут, где нет ни зимы, ни лета.
Когда человек выходил в оранжерею и видел капель конденсата на листьях, на зеленых листочках этих растений, которые не набирали силу. И, конечно, это напоминало оранжерею.
Cubits with plants stood here. It was all immersed inside. There was nothing.
Общая площадь.
The total planting area was 7.5 square meters. During the simulation of the flight, we harvested 10 harvests. That was about 20 kilograms of green biomass per month from 7.5 meters. 10 times a year without sunlight. 10 harvests. Yeah, that was good. They never saw each other. In 1967, when Soldatov urgently went to Moscow, testers for 2 months were in the test block already. They met for the first time 50 years later. Did you invent it? Soils? Yeah, I made it. The name of substrate comes from the word iron. And B is optional, either Belarus or biology.
От которого происходит и слово ионит. А Б – это уже опционно, либо Белоруссия, либо биология.
We tested the first version of artificial soil in 1965 at the institute.
В 1965 году в Институте ботаники. Нам очень повезло, потому что там был такой профессор Терентьев.
We were really lucky, because there was well-known Professor Terentiev. He looked at the case, its sand, and won't grow anything on it. I assure you. Well, put it down if you have nothing to do. We did it. After 3 weeks, he called me and said, "Plants grown like crazy in your soil."
Через 3 недели он мне звонит, и не здравствуйте, не до свидания, говорит, слушай, прет как сумасшедший, на твоем диске.
Ресурсы почвы, они, конечно, не исчерпаны, надо изучать и обязательно использовать.
But nothing happened then. On July 21st of 1969, man first landed on the moon surface. And this man was an American. The moon race has begun. The MAVER program has been stopped. Unexchanged substrate was unclaimed. Of course, journalists learned about the development, articles appeared. First, it became interesting for the gardeners. They asked for samples, but there was nothing to send. Biona was produced in the laboratory in a small scale. We organized the production of this material at several companies in Soviet Union, but wide application wasn't still found. Then Soviet Union has gone, and this research was forgotten. Minsk, nowadays. Laboratory of Vladimir Soldatov. Work on ionic soil. Here was never stopped. Perennial ryegrass is available forage crop. It's planted in different soils with different content and composition of ionics. So here we have shown the experimental results for comparison of soil, standard soil, which is made up of sterile sand. So here we have shown the experimental results for comparison of soil, standard soil, which is made up of sterile sand, treated with strong hydrochloric acid and washed afterwards, in order to remove everything what can be eaten by the plant. Biona content was just 5%. During the first 4 days, the role of the soil is minimal. The nutrients is mainly taken from the seed, therefore there is practically no difference. After 10 days, it still looks the same. These are plants that have reached the age of 21 days. The difference is obvious. These are plants that have reached the age of 21 days. The difference is obvious. Now we can predict the composition of the solution and what concentration we need to produce the substrate with optimal characteristics. We can create the soil with whatever properties we need. In Belarus, Biona has been used for cloning and adaptation of plants. Adaptation in ex vitro conditions is a very critical stage of the clonal microdecomposition plan. because at this stage, from 70 to 100% of the regenerated plants dies. We began to look for options to reduce the loss of plants. So we went to such substrates and improved adaptation using ionids.
Обычно для этого используется
It looks like normal peat soil, but on ion exchange substrate we have neither weed seeds, no bacterial, no fungal infections. It shouldn't be fed and processed, and it takes root of 100% of the plants. Moreover, practice has shown that implementation of ionids at the cloning stage affects the whole life of the plants. Plants adapted on the ion exchange substrate had twice vegetative productivity comparing to the plants adapted on the peat substrate. There is statistically reliable difference. That is already after the substrate? Yes, it's possible to talk about the post-influence of the substrate. There comes a time for intensive crop production. When we can provide a super harvest, when we can grow vegetable crops, especially that are fieldier. It could be grown in closed conditions, even directly in supermarkets.
Звучит странно, если не сказать.
It sounds incredibly, but the most amazing thing in science is that it's impossible to predict when it will suddenly change the picture of the world. For example, when a chemist says that sunlight is not optimal for plants. I tell you more, the natural soil is not optimal for plants. They had no chances to choose the environment for growing. They have just adapted to severe conditions. So they simply have no alternative. And it's possible to create much better conditions for them. Bayona was the first step of Vladimir Soldatov on this way, and it was quite efficient. There was almost an ideal soil, and Bayona had the only disadvantage: it was based on synthetic polymers. For production on an industrial scale, synthesis is relatively expensive, and polymers are not biodegradable. But this problem has been solved. Now, we don't use expensive polymeric materials. Instead of them, we use natural materials, natural minerals that are mined by mining or open pit. And therefore, they are much cheaper and fully environmentally friendly. We are talking about zeolites. Zeolite, in Greek, means boiling stone. It could be mined in many places in the world, including Russia.
Это полностью минеральное вещество, которое не содержит никаких полимеров, никаких ускорителей роста, никаких средств защиты растения. Здесь это просто природный материал, которому задано оптимальный состав по питательным веществам.
Zeolites are porous materials of volcanic origin. The surface of its internal cavities carry an electric charge. For that reason, zeolites have an ion exchange properties. The substrate based on zeolites was named Zion. This is also a combination of two words, zeolites and ions. This substance is capable to solve one of the most complex problems in crop production. We can get the plant food without nitrates. Most biologists believe that it's impossible, but Soldatov is a chemist, and he thinks differently. Zion is unique. It has almost no expiration time. It's not afraid of any heat or cold. It's not sensitive to light and moisture. It can be filled with seawater or frozen. When it thaws and dries, its properties will remain the same. Zion is not a fertilizer or soil additive. It's a natural soil with an ideal combination of minerals that any plants on Earth need. Addition of 3 to 5% of iron, even to the completely barren soil, can accelerate the plant development significantly. 10 harvests per year can be obtained by adding only water. Vladimir Soldatov has been working with plants for half a century, but still considers himself as a chemist, and therefore looks at the world of plants from the outside. And he is sure they can be controlled. Our task to replace what is not needed by plants to what they needed. Over the years of evolution, they have adapted to those nutritious media that were available. And now we are producing the substrate that supports the nutrient composition that plants need, without any other additives. Plants don't need organic substances to grow efficiently. The plant is the only organism that's able to produce organic matter out of inorganic, using sun energy, water and air. So that's the way it was.
Солнце, воду и воздух. Вот так с этим обстояло дело.